Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The talk you're about to hear may not air anywhere else. Except with Barry D. All politics are local.
Yes, it's that time for another exciting episode of All Politics Are Local, a weekly show hosted by me, Barry D. We are live from the 17th floor of the WCHE corporate building, Chester County's only AM and FM radio station, right here on West Gay Street in Westchester. We are just one block away from Westchester Seafood Kitchen, located at the Hotel Indigo, or as I like to say, Indiegogo. That's Westchester Seafood Kitchen. That's a modern seafood-centric restaurant that blends the best of the land and the sea. Indulge in the promising flavors of regional seafood classics. Open 7 days a week, and you can even catch brunch there on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yum, 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 yum.
Yeah, that's another shameless plug from one of the neighboring businesses. What have I got today, you might ask? Man, you might not. I'm going to tell you anyway. I have my monologue, which includes a little PSA by Chris Rock, and I thought with the public meeting that has been rescheduled by the Chester County Board of Elections from January 27th to February 3rd, I would have a guest in to talk about voter services. You know, one of my favorite subjects. At the boards with me today is my sidekick producer, Eric Clambera. The Green Hornet has Kato, who is played by Bruce Lee, and I have Eric. Eric gets a little bit rambunctious with his martial art training, and you cut my nose with your big toenail. Thanks, pal. Also, quick shout-out to the developer working on the Exton Square Mall housing project. Last night, he made me a feature at the hearing in West Whiteland, and any press is good press. Woohoo! I am famous! Hey, let's go back 25 years ago. There just wasn't the attack on people or companies for commercials that could, be a bit off color. Back then, the king of beers was also the king of funny commercials. Bud Light has since changed with the times, and not for the better, but we're climbing into the Wayback Machine to travel in time to when they once were and live through those good times once again. Let me just push a few buttons here on this time transport, and
Bud Light presents Real Men of Genius.
Real Men of Genius.
Today we salute you, Mr. Discount Airline Pilot Guy.
Mr. Discount Airline Pilot Guy.
Your minimal experience flying a plane will never land you at a reputable airline. Luckily, you don't work for one.
Look at me, I'm flying.
Sure, we're concerned for our lives. Just not as concerned as saving $9 on a round trip to Fort Myers.
Oh!
The most direct route to Houston through Fort Lauderdale, with layovers in Detroit, Vancouver, and Kalamazoo.
I can't feel my legs.
So crack open an ice cold Bud Light, oh skipper of the skies. You put the fly in fly-by-night operation.
Mr. Discount Airline Pilot Guy.
Bud Light Beer, Anheuser-Busch, St. Louis, Missouri.
There's been a lot of discussion in the news lately about ICE, baby, and in the social media, and in day-to-day conversations. And we're all specialists in this subject, just like everything else that the 24-hour news cycle gives us. Yep, we become professors of the situation du jour. Du jour, that means of the day for the unsophisticated non-French-speaking listeners. Just thought I'd let you know. Anyway, yeah, we've all become specialists at repeating whatever is fed to us. Well, God forbid we want to look at anything other than the news that agrees with our own miserable existence. And that's the way we feel better about ourselves, is if everyone agrees with us. And with a desperate need to get the news out first, the 24-hour news cycles, well, they don't worry if the reporting is wrong. There's always tomorrow, with no apology for the information they gave to you yesterday. We've already moved on. Forget the fact that half the people out there will never grasp that the story they heard changed, and they'll spew that same misinformation over and over and over, perpetuating that misinformation. I've heard it for years. Subjects that were absolutely... The Bush-Gore election, for example. Even the Philadelphia Inquirer finally threw in the towel and said George Bush won that election. But there are people out there that will still insist that the ballots were wrong and that Al Gore won. Lately, the big news is the peace riots that are happening all over Minneapolis. Now, I don't know that they've burned anything yet, like when George Floyd was that whole issue was happening. But I do find it amazing that the people that are supporting what is going on are the people that have gone on and on about the J6ers. And they can't seem to even see the parallels. By the J6 definition that was put out there, these are both insurrections. People are trying to attempt to thwart the federal officials from doing their jobs. That is the very definition of an insurrection, right? That is the worst of the worst. And the people out there that wanted these people to go to jail forever are now the same people out there doing these, quote, protests. But with the clarity of situational morality, one can rationalize while theirs is the very definition of hypocrisy. Of course, with all the tear gas and the flashbang grenades out there, it was only a matter of time before somebody did something stupid and picked up an item that has the word grenade. I mean, I think it's etched right on the canister, performing a magic act called, "Look, Mom, watch my fingers, make my fingers disappear." Then people in the crowd started yelling medic like they were soldiers in Vietnam. The image in the protesters' minds of who they are and what they stand for is a bit distorted from reality. Now, before some of you claim that I hate protesters, you know, the ones that say they don't listen to me and secretly do just to get mad because you're only happy when you're mad. Well, let me tell you, people that aren't listening that are listening, I dig protesters. I did it many times a couple decades ago. Probably more than most ever did. But I wasn't stupid about it. I was peaceful. And I had fun to the point of having cordial conversations with the police and thanking them for being present. And never once did I do anything that involved the launching of tear gas or law enforcement having the need to use Lexan shields and batons. And in the case of Minneapolis, the officials are stating things that if the present president said them, he would be accused of starting a riot and an attack on the government. Oh, wait, that happened a few years ago. It's either one or the other, ladies and gentlemen. You can't have both. I don't care which side of the aisle is doing this. Stop using your supporters as cannon fodder to create martyrs to show your cause is just. Simply tell the people to go home if they can't manage to hold signs on the streets without blocking people or disrupting others. We'll handle this in the courts. That's what you tell them. This is how a civilized society works. You know what you're doing? And people die because of it. And other people's lives are ruined. But the fact is, to some of the leaders, this is just simply acceptable collateral damage, willingly performed by useful idiots. Now, while this doesn't have to do with the riots, Chris Rock is here. He did a little thing a while back, and he's here to give some helpful hints when interacting with law enforcement. So, Chris, why don't you take it away?
People in the black community, myself, often worry that we might be a victim of police brutality. So, as a public service, the Chris Rock Show proudly presents this educational video. Have you ever been face to face with a police officer and wondered, is he about to kick my ass? Well, wonder no more. If you follow these easy tips, you'll be fine. First, obey the law. Laws were made for a reason. Think of them as hints. You've heard people say, man, I wouldn't do that if I was you. Well, here's some of that carjacking, armed robbery, arson, selling drugs, buying drugs, stabbing, shooting. You know, you probably won't get your ass kicked if you just use common sense. If you jump a subway turnstile, you might just get off with a warning from the police. But if you jump a turnstile carrying a loaded gun and smoking a joint, then maybe you need that kick. We all know what happened to Rodney King. But Rodney wouldn't have gotten his ass kicked if he had just followed this simple tip. When you see flashing police lights in your mirror, stop immediately. Everybody knows, if the police have to come and get you, they're bringing an ass kicking with them. Here's a no-brainer. If you're listening to loud rap music, turn that shit off. Blasting you while you're getting pulled over by the police is just ignorant. When an officer approaches your car, be polite. Is there a problem, officer? and stay in your car with your hands on the wheel.
What the do you want, my
Unless you want your ass kicked. Want to give a friend a ride? Not so fast. Your friend might be crazy. Now, before you let your friend in your car, ask them these questions. Do you have a gun? Do you have drugs? Do you have any warrants? And in case you do get pulled over by the cops,
license and registration, please.
Remind your friend to do this one thing. Shut the up.
Man, don't give him What the do you want?
If you have to give a friend a ride, get a white friend. A white friend can be the difference between a ticket and a bullet in the ass. Here's a tip you should never forget. If your woman is mad at you, leave her at home. Because a mad woman will say anything.
He got weed! He got weed!
If your woman is mad at you, there's nothing she'd like to see more than you getting your ass kicked.
That's right! Kick him to the
Now let's review. Obey the law. Use common sense. Stop immediately. Turn that off. Be polite. Shut the up. Get a white friend. And last but not least, don't ride with a mad woman. If you follow these simple pointers, you probably won't get your ass kicked by the police.
Well, I'm not sure if they're clapping for the content of my monologue today or for Chris Rock, or clapping because it's all finally over. Let's take a quick break, pay some bills, and come back with today's guest.
Barry D is back with All Politics Are Local.
With the upcoming Board of Elections meeting rescheduled until February 3rd at 7 p.m. at the Justice Center, where they'll be talking about the non-earth-shattering discoveries of the multiple failures by Director Karen Barsoom's Voter Services Department, I thought it would be a good time to talk about voter services and the handling of mail-in ballots. My guest today will go by the name Maria. With the way informants contacted me and then ghosted me, and from what I was told, it was because there were threats of lawsuits if anybody spoke up, I thought it was wiser this way. So the real names aren't needed here, as they used to say in Dragnet.
The story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Yeah, so there you go. That'll be, I guess I'm Joe Friday today. So my guest today is talking about her time working in elections, many years of doing it, and then also when mail-in ballots came in, she went down and worked doing the review of mail-in ballots. So, Maria, welcome to All Politics Are Local.
Thank you very much.
Why don't we get a little history on you? How many you worked doing the election board locally at a township, right?
Correct. And
for how many years do you think you did that?
I'm going to say probably about 12 to 15 years.
Yeah, it was over a decade, wasn't it? Yeah. And I know that where you worked, they were always pretty accurate. And it turns out that many times the polls had errors in them around the county, but the one you were working at was fairly accurate, wasn't it?
We kept our stuff the way it was supposed to be kept.
Yeah, I'm amazed. Actually, I knew a judge of elections that went to the class, and they said they weren't going to tolerate them being so far out anymore. And she said, wait, they're allowed to be out? and it was, there was a lot of slack in there. Like, and I don't know what it was, but there'd be, I know for a fact in one township to try and help out specific candidates, because the people that work on these boards also can be political, right? They support one candidate or another. I know that in one township, we discovered that they used absentee ballots before there were mail-in ballots. And absentee ballots, they would not get rid of them. They should have marked void on them or something. And then at the end of the night, somebody would slip them into the machine. So now you had more ballots in there, but you didn't know. So the people would come in and vote and say, oh, I was in town, and they should have marked void on them, and they didn't do it. And then they ran them through, which would give their person a double vote. But you couldn't tell who it was because obviously it's, a secure ballot. Nobody can ever know this stuff. So there's all sorts of stunts that can kind of happen. And I'm not one of these people that's a conspiracy theorist in any way. That, ladies and gentlemen, was a fact. And by the way, that person, when we discovered it, was reported to voter services. This was before Karen Barsoom, by the way. And do you know what they did? Nothing. And the woman did it with full knowledge. They did zero to her for that. That was voter fraud. So when you have a voter services where there's witnesses that see what happened and voter services chooses to do nothing, I really question how much they care about the sanctity of our voting.
There's a process in place for just the situation that you're talking about. And a lot of people thought they were going to be out of town, but turns out they're in town. Mm-hmm. And there's a process to do that, and the judge of elections is the one that has to sign off on that.
Right.
You pull that voter off to a separate table and do all the paperwork that you need to do so that those votes don't get double counted. Mm-hmm. Not to say somebody couldn't make a mistake. One mistake, somehow something slips through. Somebody thought they know what they were doing. Mm-hmm. But if you're
this was multiple.
That's appalling.
Yes, it is appalling. It is appalling. And it wasn't unusual for that group of people. But imagine if that happens in polls all over the place. Especially, you could have a heavy-leaning party of either side. And people would say, well, why would they do that? It's stupid. Because you know what? When you're dealing with state and federal elections, if you get them all to do it, it bumps those numbers up that much more. And lots of times, as we've seen in the Bush-Gore election, as I was talking about, it literally came down to, thousands, maybe hundreds of votes, which made the difference in Florida, which the Electoral College then went to George Bush, and he won. So these have a lot of impacts. For example, in Philadelphia, while there aren't as many Republicans as Democrats, Republicans coming out in more power may not be able to ever change politics in Philadelphia, but they can change state elections. So it's important every vote does count. Maybe not at your local level, but it certainly affects at higher up levels when people come out and vote. And that's why it's also important to have the sanctity of the votes. Let's talk about your time when you were in voter services, actually counting mail-in ballots, where they did the mail-in ballots. You were kind of at the very beginning of that mail-in ballot.
I was. It was during the COVID time. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, the mail-in ballots were no longer absentee ballots like they used to be. You used to have to give a reason why you couldn't be there, and you'd have to have the thing turned in before Election Day, so that those absentee ballots could get back to the precincts on voting day, so that the workers at the polls could look at your signature on the envelope and match it to the signature in the book and say, yes, that looks like Barry D. Okay, this is his absentee vote, and put it in the yes pile. If there was if it was very, very different or totally wrong, there was a process to go through and say, this one looks iffy to me, and pass it on to people way above us volunteers at the polls. When the mail-in ballots started, there were just thousands and thousands and thousands of these ballots coming in. And on Election Day, the county was not allowed to touch them beforehand. So on election morning, we were in a building here in Westchester, and there were hundreds of people who were there. And you were given a box from some precinct, and you were supposed to go through and make sure that every envelope had a signature on it that matched the name.
Mm-hmm.
Not matched the book, not matched their known signature.
Right.
Just said, yeah, that could be John Smith, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But what if it said Mary Smith?
Right.
Right? And, like, very precise handwriting, not a horrible signature. And you're like, well, this says Mary Smith and the top says John Smith.
Right.
So you'd put that off in a pile.
Mm-hmm.
You'd get a bunch of those, and they would go to a little area where there were a bunch of lawyers. Karen was there.
Mm-hmm.
And they would look at those, and I didn't see... There were ones that had no signature. There were ones that had an obviously totally different signature.
Mm-hmm.
And
how many of them got rejected?
I saw not one, and
0.
I was there for 9 hours that day.
9 hours.
And happened to be close to the where they were sorting them out. There were people from both political parties there and people from voter services, but no one said, well, certainly Mary Smith is not John Jones.
Mm-hmm. Just went through.
Just goes through.
Why do you think they didn't have you doing comparisons of signatures?
I don't know how. Logistically, in that room, it would almost seem impossible because I got a tray from, precinct 102.
Oh, so you couldn't.
So, like, I didn't have a book from 102. Mm-hmm. Like, that seems difficult. But, like, if anybody had called me, the answer is get those out to the precincts. Even if you have to send county help to every single precinct, they could sit there with the book at the precinct, and match the signatures and say, well, holy moly, John Jones his signature does look like Mary Smith. That's him. Boom. And then pull aside the ones that are good because they're not being matched to anything. In theory, if I had mail-in ballots sent to my house, I could have filled out my husband's ballot, signed his name, sent it in, and said, you never got your ballot, sorry. Or
right.
He might not think of it, or whoever, your kids, whatever, neighbors, pull them out of a mailbox, fill it out and send it in. No one's even checking to make sure that signature matches.
This is outstanding because we're sold a bill of goods that, they're here to protect a sanctity of vote. And they're looking more at not mine being protected as in my vote counts and a vote that's not done properly has less value, because it does have less value. I did mine right. I did it by the law. You didn't. So are they really protecting that? And I think the answer is no. The answer is they're saying every vote counts no matter what it is, which is the same problem they had recently. When the first thing they did is they came up with this plan, just let the people come that are third-party voters, shall we say, the libertarians, the green, the independents, all that. So when they would, the first thing that I remember voter services doing, and I followed this quite clearly, in fact, WCHE broke the story before anybody did. We had it on the air at 8 o'clock in the morning. And when that happened, I was shocked, but the first cure was, just take their name, they just write it down. They had nothing to check it to. They had nothing, and they were just going to just do that. But you didn't know who it was because you didn't know who it was. There was no book. There was no way to compare it, and there's no looking at ID. So now you have no way to do it. And the only way that got stopped, which nobody reports, is that the Republican lawyers were like, you can't do this. Anybody could be coming in and taking full advantage of this. Later on, the attorney for the Republican Party, Dolores Treoni, she was abused for saying that Republicans want to take away people's right to vote, when in fact she was trying to protect everybody's proper voting. Right to vote doesn't mean that you just can go out and willy-nilly vote.
I think they should have had them vote provisionally.
Right.
You fill out your ballot, you fill out the whole provisional form, and all the information's on the front of the envelope. No one can see what your vote is inside. The same way if, I voted here for 10 years and all of a sudden I'm falling off the books and I'm like, I can't let you vote like the person in front of you and behind you, but I can certainly let you vote, and then you can all work this out. No one's going to be able to get you an answer today, but they will be able to get you an answer. Right. And that's how they all should have been handled from the very
beginning.
The problem is if people don't... The rules in the room are correct. If you follow what they've set forth, but they don't. Like, why would you be writing about on a piece of paper these people that I'm going to give ballots to and let them just put it in the box?
Right.
Like,
they were just winging it.
Could be somebody that's confused who already mailed in their ballot. Like you just have no idea. And, like, sometimes people don't know. We have people who come in during primaries, if they're an independent voter or some other third-party voter, don't even realize they don't get to vote in the primary if there's nothing on their ballot.
Sure.
So people are confused. They don't always know. Like, in theory, we should be the experts that are helping them through. The trouble is, it's all volunteer. Most people take it very, very seriously. I don't care who you are, who you're going to vote for. We always made sure that everybody got a chance to vote however we needed to do, whatever we needed to do to make that happen.
And then it was up to voter services to filter that out at the end. I find it interesting. The mail-in ballot, you hit on something that was very interesting, and that was the old absentee ballots, which are still allowed. A lot of people don't know that. The absentee ballots still exist. And in fact, I got in too late to do my mail-in ballot, and the reason I was doing a mail-in ballot was because I couldn't be at the polls. I was going to be someplace else, so I couldn't do it, so I needed to fill that out. And they said, oh, you missed the deadline. But they never said to me, are you not going to be available to go to the polls that day? They never asked me that, because then I would have been able to vote. And I'll tell you the rest of the story when we come back from a commercial.
Barry D is back with All Politics Are Local.
All right, we're back, and I'm speaking with Maria, not her real name. The names are being changed to protect the innocent.
The story you're about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
That's right. Straight out of Dragnet. So, straight out of L.A. So, here's what ends up happening. They don't tell me that. So now, my choice is either not vote, or I'm going to have to rearrange my whole day when I'm supposed to be someplace else, and I'm not going to be near the polls, and I'm going to be there till 10 o'clock at night. So I ended up having to make a bunch of phone calls and make it so that I could vote at my polls. But then it turned out, as I discovered later on that day, all they need to do is say, listen, if you're not going to be around, you can do an absentee ballot. They just said the deadline had passed. I assumed that meant the deadlines for both absentee and mail-in. Now, I still don't understand. Maybe you can help me with this, and maybe you can't. What was wrong with the absentee ballot that we had to go to mail-in ballots? What's the point? An absentee ballot, you can't go because you have a physical problem, or that you don't have the ability to get there because you don't have the ability. I can't be there because I can't. There's no physical way for me to get there, or I'm out of town, or whatever. What's wrong with just having an absentee ballot?
Well, I don't really understand why they added that on, except that in the olden days, an absentee ballot, you had to put a reason. I'm going to be out of the state, I'm going to be, whatever it is. And mail-in ballots are kind of seems like a convenience for folks.
Right.
Yeah, I don't understand. Well, I might understand why there was such a push for it, but it does make it very, very difficult to know who, with the volume of them, to make sure that the person who's filled out that ballot is the person that was supposed to fill out that ballot.
Do you see any reason, and this is just, you're shooting from the hip, this is just your opinion, I'm not holding it to you, because I've never been able to figure it out. Do you see any reason why the mail-in ballots should come back to the county alone and not go to the precincts? Because The precincts are intimate with many of these people. Not bigger precincts, maybe not so much, but smaller precincts, they're like, oh yeah, it's Joe or Bob or Helen or whatever, right? And they already have the people there. It's not like it's busy all day in the polls. They can be processing mail-in ballots when it's a little slower.
Right, because if you have all those mail-in ballots, those people aren't coming in to vote.
Right.
So you do have more time.
Right, because they're just not showing up. They're still your voters, right? And the precincts are adjusted to maximum of so many voters, right? Or at least they try and keep it. We don't want to go over this many because we know they'll get overwhelmed. So they have precincts because of that. And they divide it down for convenience sake.
Right, and the county is obviously willing to pay people to touch those envelopes and pass them through the process.
Mm-hmm.
So send some extra help to every single precinct.
Right.
If somebody's going to get X amount of these mail-in ballots and it's going to be cumbersome for them,
mm-hmm.
we'll send them to people to help who are going to go through and help them, sort them, whatever. But like, there's no check on them. Like all the integrity of that process disappeared with mail-in ballots. No one looks at it.
Nobody looks at anything, and that's a big problem. And this is where I really see an issue. And in fact, when you do them at a drop box, when you put them into a drop box, you're allowed to put like one other one in there with yours. And several years ago, after a long time of delays, there were people that had right-to-knows with the county that finally got all the pictures because there was a camera on the one right at Government Services Building. Right there. Right there. There was even a thing that said you have to blah, 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 blah. By the way, I don't even know if they check because you're supposed to have permission slip in order to carry somebody else's ballot. I don't know of anybody that's ever been checked. I've dropped off my mail-in ballot before. Nobody's ever checked and, said anything about anything, right? But they're supposed to check. I've seen people have a couple. They just drop them in. Nobody ever says anything, right? But when they did this right to know for all the pictures, I went through every one of those pictures personally. There were people that were dropping off 6, 7, 8, 9 of those mail-in ballots. One of them was wearing an emergency services Chester County shirt with the embroidered, blazoned emergency services thing. So there's somebody for emergency services was dropping off 9 of them. Did you ever hear anything about that? No. Nothing ever happened to any of those people, and it was clearly against the law. Nothing. Not a thing. How serious is Chester County about making sure this is secure? I don't see it. You didn't see it.
I don't see it. And I think not every one of those people dropping off more than 1 or 2 ballots is nefarious by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
Right? I could be bringing mine, my husband's, and my 2 kids. That's 4.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing really, in theory, I shouldn't be doing that, but there's really nothing nefarious there. And maybe he's like the best emergency worker, and he took all of his buddies from work and dropped them off because it's on his way home.
Right.
So maybe we need to man them. Maybe they only are open when someone's there. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And send somebody away and say, give them back to the people. They're going to need to drop it off themselves. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but like maybe you should have just mailed them. Like,
See, that was early on. And that, by the way, it's a stamp, right? Just put it in the post office. Now, there's people that don't trust the mail, and I get it, right? Because if you want something lost, put it in the mail. I don't know. But, I've also had good luck with the mail. There's people that don't trust, and I get that. You want to put it in the box, you're doing that whole, that's fine. But, the rules are the rules on that stuff. But nothing happens. But they did make the signs bigger. That was a plus.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so that was a plus. At least I saw that they were very emphatically, now we're really serious, and we're warning you with more information that you're not supposed to do this. But, now, you don't do the polls anymore?
I do not.
Yeah, well, you did your time, right?
Well, I'm very disenchanted. I would still be doing it. I would in theory do it forever.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, the 2 years that I did in Chester County. I thought we are being so careful and so meticulous and doing whatever we need to do, never turning it away, doing provisional ballots, and then that.
And it was being ignored.
Yeah, and then that's going on in Chester County.
Yeah.
So, they're coming in by box loads. Maybe they're legit, maybe they're not. You hear horror stories, but if you don't know, then you kind of got to assume that there's things going on.
Sure, absolutely. There's a couple statistics out there that I find fascinating. There was a lot being done that there were crazy accusations about Fulton County in Georgia when the president, it was President Trump at the time, was accused of trying to not challenge the election, but manipulate the election. And he was talking about Georgia, and he was saying, listen, what's going on down there? Where are the votes? What's happening here? And it turns out now they have since raided Fulton County. All the computers have been taken. Everything's been taken to see what's going on down there. Fulton County, this isn't just out of the blue. They've been known for not even conducting list maintenance, leaving the voter rolls filled, overflowing with dead people and illegals that never should have been on the rolls in the first place. But they got there because of some slip in the motor voter registration and all that, and they've never cleaned any of that up, which means there's a lot of room for people that aren't that person representing themselves as somebody else, as what you're talking about. I actually know a guy, this happened in Upper Euclid Township. He went in to vote, and as a joke, he said, hey, have these two been in yet? And they went, yeah, they already voted. He went, they can't. It's my mom and dad. They've been dead for 2 years. They had voted. It happens. It happens here. I've known this guy personally for 20 years plus. When he told the story, it just sent shivers up my spine because he's not that guy that's going to tell a story. And that's a problem, right? Chester County, for example. Chester County was one that had huge amounts of people that hadn't been purged off the records. And it took a nonprofit group called Judicial Watch. They had to warn them and say, if you don't start purging them, we're going to sue you. And they let it ride. And then finally Judicial Watch sued the county. And all of a sudden the county announces, we're going to clean up the voter rolls, like they volunteered to do it. When you hold back on those types of things, there are so many people out there that can then be taken advantage of that are gone. They're dead. They've moved. They've done whatever. Worse yet, you could be voting and you live in Ohio now, and somebody voted for you here. Well, the next thing you know, who's getting charged with a federal crime for voting at two places? You are, because it's your vote. You didn't get purged. You had nothing to do with it. You've moved on. And so the innocent get punished once again on this. I can tell you, let me just give you some examples on this. In Oregon, 2024 and 2025, Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit in October 2024 against Oregon's Secretary of the State for, motor voter violations. That contributed to the state beginning to remove approximately 800,000 inactive voter registrations. 800,000. Think about that. That's just insane. Kentucky, same type of thing. Ongoing removal of the 735,000 ineligible registrations. A lot of this started, do you remember the motor voter law?
I do.
That was started under President Bill Clinton. Everybody gets registered to vote. So you go and you get your license, which in Pennsylvania at the time, you get your license and be a non-citizen. It was fine. They didn't change that until years later. It was after 9/11 that happened. So, it was like 93, I think that happened, motor voter. And so what they did was when you'd go in and you'd get your picture taken, you merely check the box. Are you a U.S. citizen? Who was checking it? So somebody that was living in the country would check the box, either not knowing or knowingly, and became a voter. Never got purged. So they were voting for perhaps years. I know somebody that has gotten repeated solicitations to register to vote. She's Ukrainian. She's a refugee here. And if she didn't know better, she would have registered. But she knows better. I'm not a citizen. I can't do that. But the end is, it comes back to the same thing I said before. These people become the cannon fodder, right? They do it. They're the useful idiot. They do it. It helps the cause of one party or another. And when they go to jail for it, you shouldn't have done it. Well, you told me to do it. Yeah, you shouldn't have listened to us. So you get into these situations that are really bad. Did you ever have any situations while you were at the polls where people got turned away and you said, sorry, you can't vote here, period? There's no proof of who you are or anything like that? Was there ever anything like that?
We never turned anyone away. We would try to exhaust all thing. We could call voter services. Like sometimes we'd find out they were supposed to be voting two districts down or whatever, and we'd send them on their way to go vote there. If it was 5 of 8 and the polls were going to close and they couldn't make it where they needed to be, we would let them vote provisionally at our spot and let, all the downside votes wouldn't count because they weren't voting for the people
local,
at local. But they could at least get their up votes counted eventually when it got back to voter services. We would never turn anyone away. We would try to exhaust everything to make it be straightforward. But if we had to, we would let them vote provisionally.
And then it was up to somebody to decide after that. And that's the way it needs to be done on something like that. I'll tell you what, we're going to take a break. Going to pay some bills. We're going to come back with Maria.
Barry D is back with All Politics Are Local.
All right, I am back, and I'm talking with Maria. We're talking about voter services and a lot about the mail-in ballots, what's going on with those things. And, I'm just not secure in the mail-in ballot. I mean, I've done it. I've personally done it because I've needed to, but I qualified every time as an absentee ballot. So I don't need mail-in ballots, and I think that this is a problem. In a lot of countries, they don't have such a thing as a mail-in ballot. Did you, when you worked at the polls, was there occasions when you would look at somebody's ID? Like if they were the first-time voter there or anything like that? Was there a process for that?
You do need to see some kind of ID if it is the first time that voter is voting in your precinct. And so they have to show their voter registration card or their ID, mail addressed to them at that address if they've moved in here. Like we try to bend as hard as we can. So yes. Yes, you have to ID. Sometime, if people have a very complicated name, they will hand you their ID.
I hand my ID every time.
Right. It's much easier than them trying to spell it and us trying to find it. But we are not supposed to ask for it, but except in the occasion when they're a new voter.
I've heard it said many times that asking somebody for ID is... they've said it's racist. They say you're putting people in a very embarrassing situation. I don't necessarily agree with that in any way. Do you see a reason why they shouldn't ask for ID?
I cannot imagine how, in this day and age, everyone does not have an ID. There are you can't buy a 6-pack of beer without ID from a grocery store. I don't care if you're 80 years old. You're going to have to show that ID. There are buildings you can't get into. There are, if you're telling me that someone, is in a bad place, they don't have a job, they need assistance, they're going to need ID to do all of those things. If it is an issue, then let people take that up. Make it easy or cheap or free, whatever they need to do to be able to have ID. It just seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I haven't been able to hear an actual legitimate argument for why you shouldn't have ID. I just don't get it. I mean, now, I will tell you that I have had the occasion where in my life, my normal life other than this, that older people, much older people, don't have ID because now their children are taking care of them and they're mostly housebound. They don't get out much, they don't drive, and so they don't get them an ID. But a Pennsylvania ID is fine. It's not a driver's license. And I don't know why they're not getting them that, because I'm going to tell you, there's always going to be an issue where they're going to need to see ID on that individual. And I've actually had people say, well, they don't have any ID. And I'm like, well, then we got a problem here, because I can't do what you need me to do without ID. And in those cases, I'm allowed to get 3 different things, like a birth certificate, a marriage certificate, Social Security card, Medicare card. If you can show me 3 different non-photo IDs, then I'm okay. But they'll even issue IDs without photo if you can't get into the photo center or the driver's license center. They'll do it without that. If you have a reasonable excuse why you can't have an ID, why you can't get a photo, because you can't get there, you're housebound, you may be bedbound, right? But if there's legal documents that need to be signed, and say a notary has to do it, if they don't know you, or there's not a mutual association that the both of you have, the person that's bedbound and the notary, the friend that can say, hey, I personally know this guy, and I personally know the guy that's vouching for him, there's a problem, because it's not getting done unless they have 3 non-photo IDs. And I've seen people scramble for those types of things. And it's an issue. But when you're talking about something like voting, I think it's very important. But it's too much where they're just pushing this stuff and they're saying, you know what, instead of upsetting anybody, just let them vote. Well, you do that enough, the system gets manipulated. You just need to push enough people in there, and it can be done. So it's very frustrating to me, and the way they're handling these mail-in ballots, I'm really glad you came in to talk about this. I will tell you a real quick story, because I've only got a couple minutes here before we do a closeout. There was a situation at a polls in northern Chester County. I knew the judge of elections there. These people came in, it was like 3 or 4 of them, and they didn't have any ID. They just had these little laminated cards that said that they lived on this farm down the road. They just lived on this farm. And they said, well, we don't have you in the books. I said, well, we live there. And they said, okay, let's see what we can do. So the judge of elections turns her back, and she makes a phone call to voter services to ask them what to do. And they finally said, look, you can give them a provisional ballot. That's about all you can do. By the time she turned around, they were gone. I wonder how many other places they went with other types of bogus ID to see where they could vote. You know, these are the things that happen that, in local elections, a lot of times they're won and lost by 10 or 20 votes. You know, and you do 10 or 20 votes in each precinct in the county, that's 224 precincts or something like that. All of a sudden, that's a lot of votes for changing an election. So it makes a huge difference. By the way, one other thing. You know, institutions where people with dementia patients are, Alzheimer's, things like that, memory care facilities. There are a couple townships that have places that handle people that have what do you call it? They're mentally challenged people. And they used to bring them into a polls, again, in northern Chester County. They'd bring them in, and they would bring them in by the bus, like the little buses, and they'd have them vote. These kids, as I called them, they were adults that had the right to vote, would come in, and they didn't know why they were there. And you'd hear them in the little booth area going, where the candy? and you'd hear the person go, just fill in that football. Now, I don't know if they were filling in for Republican or Democrat. I don't know what they were filling in, but they could just fill in that football. Of course, that's gone now. You can't just do straight party voting. But they were being coached by somebody. In some cases, I don't think the people were even doing the voting. It was the helper that was doing it. No paperwork to certify that they were able to do it. The polls was letting it go. This was 30, 40, 50 people. But I can tell you it doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen anymore. Because the same signature, I'm sure, is on every mail-in ballot for those people. Those people could be bedbound, blind, in a coma, and they're voting. And there's no way to prove otherwise, ladies and gentlemen. And that happens all over the country. So think about that. So now that I've depressed everybody, let's do the close of the show, shall we?
There are two things which clearly differentiate the human species from animals. One, we use cutlery. Two, we're capable of controlling our sexual urges.
And that's true. And I'd like to thank Sergeant Friday for that. that was the Dan Aykroyd Sergeant Friday from the movie Dragnet. So I'd like to thank Maria, my guest, not her real name, and for coming in to talk about voter services. Thank you so much, Eric Clambera, my producer here on All Politics Are Local. His dedication and hard work comes at a cost. A very meager paycheck. Eric is also the co-host of the morning show here on WCHE, Monday through Friday. Tune in, especially on Mondays and Wednesdays when it's Eric and me, Barry D. If you've ever had the desire to put forks in your eyes, just tune in and listen to us.
Oh my God!
Actually, that's not true. There's news, there's traffic, there's weather, there's lots of information on what is happening locally and beyond, and the conversation is worth participating in. So call in, especially this Monday. This Monday, we have a political segment on Mondays from 8:45 to 9 o'clock. And this will be, for the first time, we will welcome callers to this. So if you don't participate and the segment sucks, much like voting for bad candidates, you and only you are to blame. So keep the call-in number close by. You'll find it on our website. Remember to support local radio like WCHE. We're the ones that have your back. Those Philly radio stations, they don't care about you. They care about Philly. Spend your money here in Chester County. Support the local guys. Local businesses are your neighbors, for God's sake, and your friends. And support that sponsor, those ones that sponsor WCHE. They are our community. And if you don't have community, you got nothing. And, hey, if you like my show, take the time to send a nice note to WCHE at 953WCHE.com. You know, some say my show gives them anxiety. You know, it's probably because
chicks dig me because I rarely wear underwear, and when I do, it's usually something unusual.
As always, thank you to that radio darling of Westchester, Donna Saul, the general manager of WCHE. She told me this place is like Hotel California. I can check out, but I can never leave. Be sure to like and follow the WCHE Facebook page where you can keep up on all that's happening around the town and in the county. You can also see updates and videos on both my Facebook page, which is WCHE All Politics Are Local with Barry D, and my YouTube channel, All Politics Are Local with Barry D. Today's intro music is from, do you know this one, Maria? Did you notice it?
I did not.
You're never going to know. You would know it if it was the second version, but not the first version. This comes from Ian Freebame Smith. It's the original theme from Magnum P.I., which charted nowhere. It's like got a jazzy sound to it. It was used for the first dozen episodes of the show, Magnum P.I., and then it was replaced with the iconic version that everyone recognizes that actually did chart. But I chose to use the earlier version. That's how I roll. Little final advice of the day. This goes back to the protests in Minnesota, Minneapolis. If it's not yours, don't touch it. And the same goes for anything that might explode. Be sure to get on over to that meeting on February 3rd at 7 p.m. and hear what the commissioners are going to do to fix the repeated failures of voter services. I really got a grimace from Maria on that final advice of the day. Yeah, that all rests on one person. So that one person, let's close out today's show with that duet version by Keith Rural and Carrie Overboard. That hit song, Time to Go, Karen. I'm Barry D. for All Politics Are Local. Thanks for listening.
complicated job to make sure the people get their vote. But Director Karen can't seem